Hello. I've got a lovely story for you now, which is the link between the last one I did in this series about Abraham and the next one I did, which was about Joseph, his grandson. And so this one is about his son. Do you remember his name? It means laughter, and that's what his mum did when she heard that he was going to arrive. She thought that was too funny for words. His name was Isaac, you remember? And eventually, when she was very, very old, his mum Sarah died, and he was very sad. And Abraham thought, it's time that boy got married. And so he sent him off to find a wife from his old family, because he didn't want him marrying into the people who lived locally, because they had very unsuitable, awful practices, and he didn't want them to do that. So he sent him to find a wife. And he found a lovely lady called Rebecca. We sometimes meet people called Rebecca nowadays, don't we? And they fell in love at first sight. It was very special. And so Isaac took Rebecca home to his mum's old tent where his mum had lived and been very happy for years, and he installed her there as his wife. And Rebecca and Isaac had two boys. They had twins. One was called Esau, and one was called Jacob. And Esau was they said he's a hairy man. I'll give him a big blue hat here. And he was all red when he was born. So we've got, give him a red beard and lots of red hair. We need a black brush for that one, don't we? And he and Jacob didn't get on well at all. And Jacob was the complete opposite. They were dissimilar twins. Jacob, they'd said in the Bible, was a smooth man. He hardly had any hair on his arms and neck and leg. He was just very different to Esau. And they didn't like one another at all. They really didn't. They were always arguing, always getting into trouble. And Esau loved going out hunting. And his dad, Isaac, loved having the game stew that it could be made from the things that Esau had hunted and brought home, probably deer and that sort of thing. And when Isaac got very old, and he realised that he probably wasn't going to live much longer, he wanted to give Esau his blessing, because Esau was the first one to be born of the twins. Jacob nearly was, but then Esau came out first. So Esau was the oldest one, and he should receive the blessing. Well, Rebecca heard what he was planning, and Rebecca loved Jacob more than Esau, I'm afraid. It's not good to have favourites, is it? But Jacob was happy to stay with her in the tent and do cooking and that sort of thing, and Esau was always off out hunting. So when Esau disappeared off hunting to get some game to feed Isaac his favourite dinner, Rebecca said to Jacob, just go and get me some fresh meat from the flock, and I'll do Dad a stew, because he's planning to give Esau the blessing, and I want you to have that blessing. Well, Jacob did what Mum said. He went and got a couple of young goats, and they chose the very best, tenderest part of the meat and stewed up a really special stew, just the way that Isaac loved it. And by now, Isaac had lost the sight in his eyes. He really couldn't see very well. And so Jacob said, but Mum, he'll know it's not me, because if he puts his hand on mine, he'll know that it's me because of the smoothness of my skin. And if he puts his hand on the back of my neck to bless me, he'll know. Rebecca said, don't worry, I've thought of that. We'll use the goat skin. And so she put some of the hairy goat skin on Jacob's arms and some on the back of his neck. And she dressed him in Esau's clothes, which smelt of the fields and the outdoors. And she said, here you are, here's the stew, take it to your dad and get that blessing. So when Jacob got near to Isaac, he said, here is your stew, Dad, I've prepared it for you. He said, Isaac said, well, that was quick, my boy, that was very quick. And so Jacob said, well, God bless me. Wasn't true, was it? And so the deception continued. And Isaac was quite suspicious. He said, it sounds like Jacob, but it smells like Esau, and certainly a delicious stew. Come here, my boy, and let me bless you. And he blessed him with all the blessings you could imagine. Wonderful life, family, land, prosperity, and a wonderful relationship with God. And then, shortly afterwards, Esau came home, cooked up the stew and took it to his dad and said, "Here we are, Dad, here's the stew I've done for you." And Isaac said, What's going on here? I've given the blessing to, I thought I'd given the blessing to you already. It must have been your brother. And Esau said, "I'll kill him." He was furiously angry. And Rebecca heard him say this, and she said to Jacob, "Your life's not safe. You're going to have to run away for a bit. Go off to stay with your uncle or something, but you have to escape from here," because Esau's really furious. It's not surprising, is it? And Esau said to his dad, "Didn't you even save a little tiny bit of blessing for me?" And Isaac said, "No. I blessed him with everything I could think of. I'm sorry, Esau, but no." Wow, what an awful thing to happen. So they were at loggerheads, these two, and I call them this. I call them the terrible twins. Well, Jacob set off, running away, and when it got to night time, and it was dark and in the wilderness, he lay down to sleep. He found a smooth stone, which make a nice pillow, and he put his head on it, and he fell fast asleep. And as he slept, he dreamt that he could see a ladder going up to heaven, and on it were lots and lots of angels. You can see them on there. Perhaps I'll show up a bit more if I do them with a blue brush. Let's have a look. You can see angels going up and down the ladder, taking messages to God in heaven. And when he woke up, he said, "Wow, this place must be very holy and special." He was so struck with what he'd seen. And he also had a fight with God, he felt, a real wrestling match, which left him with a hip out of joint, and that feels quite uncomfortable. And ever afterwards he limped, but he never forgot that encounter with God. And God promised him that he would prosper him, and that he would look after him. And so Jacob built a special pillar there where he'd fallen asleep and had this amazing dream, and he called it Bethel. I'll put the name there so that you can remember it. Sometimes you get chapels nowadays called Bethel, don't we? And that's named after Jacob's ladder. And sometimes we get places which are called Jacob's ladder. There's a series of steps in the hill up in Cheddar, not far from where I live, and that's called Jacob's ladder. So sometimes you'll find buildings that have got a tall lot of steps up, or a big place that you can climb called Jacob's ladder. And now you know why that's happened, haven't you? And this whole story comes in this book here, at the beginning of the Bible. The book of beginnings is Genesis, the book of beginnings. And it's a lot of it, a tremendous adventure story. And one day perhaps you can read it for yourself. It really is an amazing story. Now, one thing I think we've got to do is to add in a new action. Because if you remember, we've done creation and fall and the flood, then the tower, scattering of the nations, 4,000 years, and then Abraham, the friend of God. And God promised Abraham he would have descendants like stars, stars in the sky. And one of those was Isaac, wasn't it? Isaac, whose eyes went bad in the end. And Isaac had the terrible twins, Jacob and Esau. And Jacob, as God had promised, went on to have 12 sons. That would have been a noisy household, wouldn't it? Or tent-hold, I suppose, because they lived in great big tents in those days. And one of them was Joseph. And that's the next story that you may want to watch in the series. So God bless you, and thank you for watching.